Good day, everyone. Today we will discuss language registers, focusing on how we use different styles of language depending on the purpose, situation, and audience. This report will explain the five main types of language registers, and we will also include insights from Asif Aga's study to show how registers reflect our culture, identity, and social roles. But before we proceed, let us define first of what language registers are. So, language registers refers to the way we adjust on how we speak or write, depending on the situation, purpose, and audience, just like what I have mentioned earlier. Also, it's about choosing the right tone, words, and styles based on the level of formality needed. So now let us define one by one what are the five main types of language register. So the first one is the frozen register. So this type of register is a fixed and unchanging way of speaking that is used in very formal or ceremonial situations, like for example oaths or legal oaths. And then we have the national anthems, our very own Lupang Hinirang, and then the Lord's Prayer in a church. So those examples are fixed, right? And then the next register is the formal register. So this is formal and this is polite and structured language. So examples are a speech at a graduation. For example, distinguished guest, it is my honor to stand before you today. And then we have the academic writing and then even job interviews. So you might ask, what is the difference between them if they are both formal in a way? So you just want to remember that frozen register is a fixed and unchanging way of speaking, while the formal register is flexible and you have the freedom to choose any formal words. The third one is the consultative register. This is semi-formal, that is used in conversations where one person is more knowledgeable. Examples are a doctor explaining to a patient, you should take this medicine 3 times a day after meals, or a teacher to a student, or even a customer asking for help. So those conversations that they have, they uses consultative register. The fourth one is the casual register. This type of register, we used it in our everyday lives with our friends or peers. So this is very informal and relaxed. So we use slangs, idioms, or even abbreviations. So like for example, hey, what's up? Wanna grab lunch? Or OMG, an abbreviation for oh my god or oh my gosh or BRB and so on and so forth. So that's the casual register. So the last one is the intimate register. So this is personal and private language used with close friends, families, or romantic partners. Examples are talking to a loved ones like good night honey, sweet dreams, or nicknames for your partners like honey, babe, or even for your best friend, which is bestie or buddy. So that's intimate register. You can only use this register with your intimate relationships. Okay, so let us proceed to the key ideas from Asif Aga's study. So, according to Asif Aga, registers are also connected to what people do or what certain role do they have. For examples, lawyers use legal terms like the defendant pleads not guilty, while the doctors use medical terms during checkups. The next one is registers are also shaped by our culture. So what is formal in one country might not be the same in another. For example, we Filipinos use po and opo to show respect, while the Japanese and Korean culture, to show respect, they had to bow or they have to bow. And then the next one, registers also shows identity and relationship. So what certain relationship do you have with that individual you are talking with? So it's either you are a student, you are an employee, or you are just a friend. So for student, they had to greet their teachers like good morning ma'am and sir to show respect and formal. While when you're just talking to your friend, you can simply say, hey, what's up? And then the next one, registers changes over time. So as our society changes or as our world evolves, our language registers also changes. So like for example, old phrases like thou art have become you are, and a lot of new terms and like LOL, OTW, IMY, and ILY, those abbreviations and emojis are now common. And then the last one is registers are not just about words. Why? Because it also includes the way we clothe ourselves, the way we act. For example, wearing a suit matches formal speech or settings, while wearing casual clothes matches informal conversations. And the way you act, like for example, you are in a formal settings, but you are moving a lot, you are showing discomfort, so it cannot complement the register that you are using. So that's how registers being linked to what people do, our culture, and as our society. So overall, understanding language registers helps us to communicate better by matching our words and tone to the right situation, whether we are just casually talking with our friends or speaking formally in a meeting. In this way, we can be able to connect with the others more effectively and build better relationships. So, thank you for watching this video. Hope you learned something from my report.
So now let us talk about language shift and death. So this report examines the complex issues of language shift and language death. It explores the factors that influence both processes, differentiating between various types of language death and analyzing the perspectives of prominent linguists such as David Crystal, Walt Wolfram, and Del Matthews. So first, let us talk about language shift. So, language shift is when a community gradually switches from one language to another. It is most likely to happen in communities where there is a mix of languages, but no single language is clearly dominant. It occurs in an unstable language community, typically where there is bilingualism and no diglossia. So when we say diglossia, it is when a community uses two distinct varieties of the same language, one for formal situations or the high variety, and another for informal situations or low variety. For instance, in the Philippines, English or Filipino language is used for formal communication such as education, business, and etc. While various regional languages like Cebuano, Bicolano, Ilocano are used for casual and everyday communication. Therefore, in language shift, there is no dominant language. And since there is no diglossia, people in that community can use any variety of language for any purposes. So this means there isn't a clear distinction between a formal and informal variety, or a high and low variety. So according to Matthews 1983, there are three factors that influence language shift, which are migration, arrival of a large number of monoglots, and the change in economic situation. So when we say migration, it is the movement of people from one place to another with the intention of settling in the new location, which often exposes them to a dominant language, reducing the use of their native language over time. For instance, the migration from the Philippines to the US has led to a language shift towards English. And we have the second one, arrival of the large number of monoglots. So when we say monoglots, these are the people who speaks only one language. So according to Matthews, a large number of people who speak only one dominant language can influence bilingual speakers to switch languages for ease of communication. For example, the arrival of English speakers in the Philippines during the American colonial period. So this arrival has led to a shift towards English as the language of education, government, and businesses in the Philippines. So the last factor is the change in economic situation. So, change in economic situation refers to shifts in the economic landscape that can involve industrialization, globalization, recessions, or technological advancement, all of which impact job opportunities and language value. Economic pressures or opportunities can make it necessary for individuals to adopt a dominant language for better jobs or social mobility. For instance, job seekers or employees learn the English language for job interviews, since English language has become the global language for businesses and etc. So now let us move on to language death. So language death is a process where a language ceases to be spoken by any living person, leading to its complete extinction. A language is effectively dead when there is only one speaker left, with no member of the younger generation interested in learning it, according to Crystal D. 2002. One example of language death is the extinction of the Tasmanian language. So this language, spoken by the indigenous people of Tasmania, was wiped out in the 19th century due to the brutal colonization of the island by Europeans. The last speaker of the Tasmanian language, a woman named Truganini. She died in 1976. So Campbell and Munsell, 1989, identify four primary types of language death, each of which has linguistic and sociolinguistic consequences. So the first type of language death, according to Campbell and Munsell, 1989, is the sudden language death. So sudden language death occurs when a language abruptly disappears because its speakers die or are killed. In such cases, for example, the sudden death of the Tasmanian language, the transitional phase is so abrupt that there are few, if any, structural consequences as the language dies. And we have the second type of language death, the radical language death. So this process resembles sudden language death in terms of the abruptness of the process, but is distinguished by the shift to another language rather than the complete disappearance of the speakers of a language. In radical language death, speakers simply stop speaking the language as a matter of survival in the face of political repression and genocide. Campbell and Munsell, 1989, cite radical language death for several Native American languages in El Salvador after an Indian uprising in the 1930s. Those thought to be Indian by appearance, including language use, were rounded up and killed in wanton acts of genocide. So many speakers of indigenous languages simply abandoned their native language to avoid recognition as Indians. And then the third type of languages is the gradual language death. The most common type of language death, and the one most critical for our examination of language variation here. It is the case of language loss due to the gradual shift to the dominant language. For instance, the decline of Gaelic in parts of Scotland. While Gaelic was once widely spoken throughout Scotland, its use has been steadily decreasing for centuries, primarily due to the influence of English. So this process of gradual language death due to economic pressure. English has been seen as the language of opportunities, leading many to adopt it for education and employment. So the third type of language death is the gradual language death, the most common type of language death, and the one most critical for our examination of language variation here. It is the case of language loss due to the gradual shift to a dominant language. For instance, the decline of Gaelic in parts of Scotland. While Gaelic was once widely spoken throughout Scotland, its use has been steadily decreasing for centuries, primarily due to the influence of English. This process of gradual language death due to economic pressure. Social prestige and government policies. So the fourth one is the bottom to top language death. In the case of bottom to top language death, the language loss takes place in everyday conversation and casual settings, while the language is retained in more formal, ritualistic context. For example, the decline of Latin. While Latin was once the language of the Roman Empire, it's no longer spoken as a native language. However, it continues to exist in religious context. Latin is still used in the Catholic Church for liturgical purposes. So now let us move on to the causes of language death. So according to David Crystal and Wolfram, there are 5 causes of language death. So the first one is the economic factors. So Crystal says that people often stop speaking their own language because they want to speak a dominant language like English to get better jobs and more opportunities. This happens because people believe that knowing a dominant language will help them have a better life. Wolfram 2008 also agrees. He says that people switch to a language that gives them better work and social mobility. This happens when they think using a dominant language will help them succeed. For instance, the shift towards English in India. While India has over 22 official languages and countless regional dialects, English has become the dominant language in many sectors, particularly in education, business, and government. Many Indians believe that fluency in English will open doors to better job opportunities, higher salaries, and access to international markets. And we have the second one is the political factors. So, Crystal explains that government policies can make a language die. When the government forces people to use one language in schools, media, or official matters, the minority languages start disappearing. Wolfram 2008 also talks about how the government can control which language is used, making it harder for people to speak their own language. This can lead to language loss over time. For example, the decline of indigenous languages in Australia. The Australian government for many years implemented policies that actively discouraged the use of indigenous language, favoring English in education, government, and public life. This policy, known as the assimilation policy, aimed to integrate indigenous Australians into mainstream society by suppressing their cultural practices, including language use. And then we have the third cause of language death, the ideological factors. Crystal says that people often think their own language is inferior or unimportant compared to a dominant language. This idea makes them stop speaking their language, especially when they think it will help them get ahead in life. Wolfram also agrees. He says people switch to a dominant language because they think it will make them more prestigious or successful. They see their own language as less valuable. And then we had the fourth one, ecological factors. So Crystal mentions that when people move from small towns to big cities or from one country to another, they start speaking the dominant language around them, which leads to their original language disappearing. And Wolfram also talks about how people move or face environmental changes, like natural disasters or economic problems, and start speaking the dominant language instead of their own. And then we have the last one, the cultural factors. So according to Crystal, it is when young people adopt the culture of a more dominant group, they may stop using their original language because they don't see it as part of their new identity. This leads to language loss. Wolfram also agrees. He says that when a culture changes, especially for younger generations, they stop seeing the value of their native language and stop using it. For instance, the decline of Hawaiian in Hawaii. While Hawaiian was once the predominant language of the islands, the arrival of American settlers and the subsequent dominance of English culture led to a shift in a language use. Young Hawaiians, seeking to integrate into the dominant American culture, often adopted English as their primary language, viewing it as a key to success and social acceptance. To conclude this report, the work of Matthews, Crystal, and Wolfram collectively address the critical issues surrounding language maintenance, shift, and death, emphasizing the need for proactive measures to preserve linguistic diversity. Matthews highlights the role of bilingual education in fostering language maintenance, arguing that it can counteract the pressures of language shift and prevent the complete loss of minority languages. Crystal also elaborates on the processes and consequences of language death, detailing how socio-political factors contribute to the decline of languages globally. Lastly, Wolfram further reinforces these ideas by discussing the phenomenon of language dying, noting that younger generations often adopt dominant languages, leading to a diminished value placed on their native tongues. Together, these scholars underscores that without conscious efforts to support and revitalize endangered languages, cultural identities tied to this language may also fade away. That's all. Thank you.
Good morning, sir. Our topic is all about the language and gender. So now, let's move to the language and gender. So, language and gender refers to how language reflect, influence, and shape our understanding of gender rules and identities in society. So first, we have the gendered language. So the society we live in uses language that have gendered elements such as nouns, pronouns, and verb form. So while some nouns are neutral, pronoun like he or she and they are gendered and can reflect the gender of the subject. Like for example, in English, he or she indicate a person gender while they is used as a gender neutral pronoun. So the second is the gendered speech. So gendered speech is that people often speak differently depending on their gender. While the woman might use more polite or cautious language, such as he just or I think or tag questions. Like it's like a it's nice, isn't it? So someone like that. So while men might speak more directly and assertively. So like for example, a woman might say, I think we should consider another option, while a man might say we should go with another option. So man is direct to the point, while woman is use more cautious language. So the third one is language and power. So language can reflect and reinforce social power dynamic, often favoring one gender. Historically, men have held more power in public and political space, and language has helped maintain this by using male term as the default, such as man for a humanity. Like for example, the term like chairman and mankind. So have a tradition but been used, though there is a shift towards more inclusive term like chairperson and humankind. So the fourth one is gender neutral language. So this gender neutral language is more like a effort have been made to use gender neutral language to be more inclusive. In English, they is used a singular word, or singular pronoun for unknown or non-binary individuals. So like for example, instead of saying each student should bring his book, one might say each student should bring their book. So like that. So the fifth one is language and identity. So this language and identity is play a key role in expressing gender identity, because some people use specific terms to reflect their gender identity, such as using they or non-binary individuals. So the words people choose can show how they want to be seen by others. So like for example, non-binary individuals might prefer the pronoun they to reflect their gender identity. Okay, so let's proceed to the main ideas of this topic. So according to Kissinger in year 2000, so the main idea is gender is something we display through our speech, because women might use polite or friendly language while men may be more direct to the point to reflect societal expectation. Like for example, a woman might say, "Can I help you with that?" While a man might say, "Let me help you." Something like that. So man is direct to the point, while a woman is more asking. So Otto ang kay Kissinger in the year 2000. So according to Cameron in the year 2007, the main idea is the difference in men and women speech are learned from society, not innate. So this difference are shaped by cultural expectations. So like for example, the society teaches women to speak softly and kindly, whereas men are encouraged to speak confidently and strongly. So again, according to Cameron in the year 2005, the main idea is gender is not fixed. It can change. So the way we speak help express gender and sexuality. to respect the identities of non-binary or gender queer individuals. So, like for example, language can adapt to reflect changing gender identities, such as using they or them to sa pronouns. So like that. So I will conclude my topic is language and gender are deeply intertwined with language reflect and shape societal notions of a gender rules and identities. So efforts to use gender neutral language and respect diverse gender identities are crucial for fostering inclusivity and equality. So, the understanding the relationship between language and gender can help us to navigate and challenge traditional gender norms, to contribute more inclusive and equitable world. So thank you for watching this report. I hope you learned something. God bless everyone and goodbye.
Good day to each and everyone. At this moment, we will be discussing another topic, exploring the connection between language, social class, and ethnicity. But before we proceed, let's first define what is social class and ethnicity. Social class refers to the hierarchical division of society based on the factors such as income, economic status, education, and occupation. Ethnicity, on the other hand, relates to the cultural and linguistic identity of a person's heritage. Language acts as a key indicator of these elements, shaping and being shaped by social class and cultural identity. Below, we will analyze the key aspects of the relationship between language and social class based on the works of Guy 2022 and Kurzel 2012. First, we have the language and social class. Social class can be revealed through language, encompassing vocabulary, pronunciation, and grammar. In Guy's study, he argues that speech reveals social class, with higher classes using language considered proper, reflecting prestige and education. For example, upper-class individuals might use standard grammar and avoid slang in formal conversations. Saying, "I'm not certain about that," might signal higher standing, whereas "I ain't sure about that" could indicate a lower background. Kurzweil also expands on this by noting that location influences speech. People from working-class neighborhoods may develop accents and vocabulary that are different from middle or upper-class speakers. For example, working-class speakers in Liverpool might say "lad" as a term of address, whereas someone in a higher class might use "friend" to avoid such colloquial terms altogether. The next one and the second is the dialect and accent. A dialect is a regional variation of language, while an accent is how the words are pronounced. Both serve as markers of identity and class. Guy emphasizes that dialects and accents are indicators of class. Higher classes often speak standardized accents, while lower class may use regional dialects viewed as incorrect. For example, a person from a lower class may use non-standard English such as "ain't" instead of "isn't." Moreover, Kurzweil notes that dialects and accents are fluid and adapt as people move or interact with those from regions and classes. This demonstrates the interplay between linguistic identity and mobility. For example, a young adult from a working class area who attends university may gradually adopt less pronounced regional accent to fit with the peers from diverse backgrounds. The third one we have here, the language and power. Language reinforces societal power structures by privileged proper speech and marginalizing non-standard forms. Those who adhere to the standard tend to gain social advantages in education, employment, and other formal settings. Guy discusses how speaking properly grants access to power and respect, whereas non-standard language can lead to marginalization. For example, employers might favor a candidate with a standard accent over one with a regional accent during job interviews. Also, Kurzweil agrees and adds that schools and workplaces favor standard language, which can disadvantage those speaking in non-standard ways. Example, a student from a rural area might struggle to adapt to academic norms if their speech diverges from the standard. The fourth one, we have the language variation across social class. Language varies not only between classes but also within a class depending on their factors like the age and education. Guy states that people in lower classes often use regional or non-standard speech, which can lead to negative stereotypes. For example, terms like y'all, as in y apostrophe then all, might be seen as informal and associated with working class or rural communities. Kurzweil also emphasizes the role of factors like employment in speech variation. Even within the same class, individuals may speak differently based on their environment. Example, a factory worker may adopt a less informal style of speech compared to someone working in an office. The fifth and the second to the last is the language change and social mobility. The movement between social classes often leads to changes in how people would speak. Guy highlights that people adopt the speech patterns of higher class when seeking for social acceptance. For example, someone moving from rural area to a city might adjust their accent to sound more urban. Kurzweil also notes that language evolves rather as people from different classes interact, especially in multicultural cities. For example, teenagers in urban areas often create hybrid accents blending multiple influences. When we say hybrid accents or speeches, it is a unique speech patterns that emerge when features of two or more distinct accents or dialects or languages are combined. For example, in multicultural London English or MLE, safe means cool or okay in MLE slangs. Last but not the least, the standard and non-standard language. Standard language is the formal or proper version, while non-standard language includes regional and informal forms. Guy asserts that standard language is tied to higher status and education, often portraying non-standard speakers as less intelligent. For example, using phrases like he don't instead of he doesn't might be viewed as incorrect formal settings. Additionally, Kurzweil argues that non-standard language has value in informal or cultural context. Over time, the lines between standard and non-standard may blur. Example, words like ain't are gaining acceptance in everyday conversation despite their non-standard origins. To sum up everything, The way people speak reveals much about their social class and cultural identity. From dialects and accents to power dynamics and social mobility, language reflects and reinforces societal structures. However, language also evolves as people interact across class and ethnic divides, challenging traditional norms. Understanding these dynamics as explored by Guy and Kurzweil allows us to appreciate more complexity and significances of language in shaping and reflecting society. And that's all. Thank you.